Thanks for joining us for Kids, Chaos, and Coffee. I am Lisa Washington here with Spencer and with Nikki. You guys, summer is going so quickly. How are we already at the middle of August?
I don't
believe it.
Right?
It's been so fast. I was just thinking football season comes back soon. It's flying by.
It's really flying by. Here's the thing. Are there things that you thought about maybe in the spring or early summer? Oh, I'm going to do that this summer, but you haven't yet done them?
I was telling you guys I have one that I'm bitter about.
Bitter?
So for Mother's Day, my husband got me a trip to Washington, D.C. It's my favorite city. I've been wanting to go and take Everett, and I had picked a weekend in July to go.
Okay.
And as it was getting closer, he was like, I'm a little nervous because it's kind of close to when we're getting back from Alaska. I don't want to be home for a weekend, turn around, and then do another trip. And I was like, if we wait, I don't think we're going to go. And he was like, no, it's fine. We'll go later in the year. It's August. We still have not scheduled it. We did schedule flights for 4 trips that we have coming up in the next 2 months. None of those.
Wait, you have 4 trips planned.
4 other trips.
But not the trip to D.C.
They're all obligations. So the D.C. trip hasn't happened yet. So that's my summer trip.
Do you think it's going to happen?
I do.
This summer?
Maybe in the fall, which is fine because it's going to be, it would have been really hot in the summer.
It's so hot there in the summer.
It's so hot.
Yeah.
We're walking around and Eb would get cranky. So it's not the worst thing that we're waiting to the fall, but when I am keeping tabs to make sure that we still go because that's that.
Absolutely. It was a Mother's Day present.
That's a long time.
Yeah.
So mine was Carowinds, right? You guys know I grew up in South Carolina. We went to Carowinds every single summer after vacation. Bible school is a big deal. My daughter went last year for her, 2 years ago actually, 5th grade trip. My son has never been. I was like, don't worry, we'll go in the summer. Have no fear. We'll get there. Guess where we haven't been.
So fast.
So I bought the tickets like 2 weeks ago, and now I just got to find the day to go. And honestly, I'm kicking the can down the road because I've not yet put it on our calendar.
At least you have the tickets.
I have the tickets, so that's promising, right?
Yeah. Do they... I'm trying to think. I've never been for Scarowinds. I'm trying to think of if that would be too scary for them because that'll be cooler then. But I don't know.
I don't want to go for Scarowinds.
Okay, yep, that's fair because I don't either. So
I mean, if we
fair.
have to, I guess I'd really like to get it in before school, and the clock is like.
So you're going this weekend? Okay.
That's kind of what it sounds like, but I do have plans for the weekend.
Oh,
so
well,
we'll see how that goes. What about you?
I don't think so. I feel like I've done so much and I'm so exhausted and like I have no end in sight of when I don't have plans. So, but I don't think that there's anything that
Do you feel like summer goes quicker? I feel like it's the fastest season. I feel like summer it's June and then it's August. I think it's the fastest season.
Maybe because Benton's birthday is June 1st, so like that kind of kicks off summer. Right. Sometimes my family's usually here, and then like Father's Day comes, and then we usually go out of town for 4th of July, so like we did that. And then I had another July trip, and then so we go down again next one. I don't know. They all kind of sometimes go fast. I
think so. The only other one I would say goes quickly would be October, November, December because of the holidays.
Yeah, of course.
And it's like bang, bang, bang. But summer does go fast because you have so much stuff.
Yes.
And summer's over, and I'm like, man, all the stuff I said I was going to do this summer, I didn't do any of it.
People say there's downtime in summer. I don't really get that.
No.
And I think once we have kids, once our kids go to school, it will feel even faster. I think that's probably why it feels faster for you so far now.
Perhaps.
Because right now, summer for me is like when it's warm outside, so it's a little bit longer. But for you, it's literally just that window between when school ends and school starts, and that's a tiny window.
It's very tiny, and it's going quickly. Well, again, summer is going fast. Some kids are already back in school. Others will be going soon. And along with going back to school are the back-to-school sports. Your kids perhaps are playing football or baseball, or I don't know what sports they start playing when they get, but football for sure. We're going to be speaking with a neurosurgeon, Dr. Sandra Yan, to talk about concussions specifically. We hear a lot about concussions. How do they happen? How do you get over them? What do you tell your kids to do to avoid them? Let's get into it to find out more about what we should be knowing when it comes to concussions. So we know kids are eager to play sports. They want to get back into school and sports, all the things. What is your message to them about being careful when it comes to playing sports?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great question to start off with. I am super happy and excited that kids want to get back into the swing of things. I think sports are a great activity to do for them to build teamwork skills and leadership skills. I think most importantly, particularly as we talk about popular sports like football, is for kids to be mindful of head injuries, particularly concussions. And so I'd say to the kids and the parents out there to, make sure to wear proper fitting gear, to talk to coaches about safe tackling techniques, and just be mindful and look out for signs and symptoms of concussion.
So break it down for us. What exactly is a concussion and how does it happen?
Yeah, so on a very basic level, a concussion is a type of mild traumatic brain injury that usually alters normal brain function. And so the way it occurs is typically when there's a bump or blow to the head, it causes the head to accelerate quickly. And so this causes the soft, squishy brain inside to hit the hard inner skull, and this basically changes brain function.
Okay, that sounds very painful. What are some of the symptoms? How do you know when one is concussed?
Yeah, there's a whole host of symptoms to look out for. Some of the more common symptoms are, headaches, nausea, confusion, some fatigue, sensitivity to light and sound. But of course, there are more serious symptoms to look out for that could be considered a medical emergency. Some of those things to look out for would be, if somebody develops weakness or numbness on one side of the body, slurred speech, persistent vomiting, if one of their pupils become larger than the other. Those are all more serious things to look out for.
Do the symptoms happen immediately? Sometimes the kids are so tough or they want to pretend that they are so tough. I'm good, I'm good, I'm good. And maybe it's hours later or days later. When do the symptoms present?
Yeah, so this is a common question I get. So of course, athletes are go-getters and they always want to get back in the game, particularly if it's a big game, the championship game. But symptoms of concussion don't always occur. Sometimes they occur immediately, but they can occur like hours or even up to days later. So it's always important for parents and coaches to look out and just be monitoring their young athlete.
What are the long-term effects of a concussion?
Yeah, so if concussions aren't properly treated or if young athletes get back into the game too quickly, they can develop repeated damage over time. And so, in the short-term period, there can be delayed recovery, but in the long-term period, when we have that repeated damage to the brain, you can develop, neurodegenerative disorders down the line, like dementia, delayed cognitive impact and things like that.
So as a parent who is not a neurosurgeon, how do you know the difference between your child who's tired, it was a long game, it was exhausting, versus possibly having a concussion because they fell once or twice during the sport?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say as a parent, you know your child the best. And so you know how they are, how they typically act. And so if it's usually just a child being tired or fatigued, you can let them get some rest and they'll feel better. But if it's more serious than that, then they'll probably still have persistent signs and symptoms, which is why it's important to be monitoring them.
And so then what is the conversation that you have with your child going into this, to you starting a sport, talking about injuries, specifically head injuries?
Yeah, I would say this is a super important conversation for parents to have with their children. I think starting that conversation early before the season starts is a great idea. It helps build up trust so that children are more likely to open up to their parents if they have sustained a head injury. Things to talk about include, what are some of the signs and symptoms to look out for, how they're feeling. I think always encouraging, giving positive feedback when they do report an injury. This makes it more likely that they will open up and report an injury in the future. Just encouraging a positive environment around reporting head injuries helps take away some of that stigma and some of those feelings of negative repercussions surrounding head injuries.
So let's talk about football specifically, because this is the beginning of football season. There are some parents who have strong opinions one way or another about their kids playing football, tackle or not. What are your thoughts about that when it comes to tackling and, because they want to prevent those head injuries?
Yeah, so I think a lot of kids, a lot of parents of younger kids like getting their kids involved in flag football initially. It still helps build some of that teamwork and some of those leadership skills, and you learn some drills and some techniques. I think the hot topic these days is what age should kids start playing tackle football? And certainly that's a question up for debate. I think most medical professionals say to wait until, the age of 14 or so. I think a lot of sports groups say anywhere from 12 to 14 is a good age for starting tackle football.
And let's talk about the safety helmets. I believe there was some consultation with some doctors. You've seen those, the larger helmets that are supposedly more helpful for some of the players. Thoughts on that? Because you want your kids to be safe.
Yeah, of course. I think a properly fitting helmet is key. Back in the old days of football, they used to wear leather helmets, and so I'm so glad that they've upgraded and changed. And nowadays, these helmets have like shock absorbers and things like that, which are helpful. I mean, I think it certainly helps when you've sustained a head injury. It doesn't prevent concussion entirely, but it's certainly a step in the right direction.
So when should you see a medical professional? Is a concussion something that resolves on its own, or is it something that maybe you need to see someone?
Oh, if you have any concerns at all that you sustain a concussion, you should definitely sit the rest of the game out. A coach should pull you out and not put you back into the game. And you should definitely get evaluated by a medical professional. And there's a whole series of steps about, when you can be cleared to return to the game. It involves rest, it involves graduated return to play.
So what does the recovery look like? Obviously, you're not going to be participating in the sport. You're saying rest and then a number of steps.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so for the first 24 to 48 hours, you should be getting some relative rest, meaning you should be getting sleep. You don't need to be isolating yourself or holding yourself up in a dark room, but you should just be taking it easy, sort of limit screen time, limit things that require a lot of cognitive load like schoolwork and reading. And then gradually, when you feel ready and up for it, you can start by returning to light aerobic activity. And if that goes well and you remain asymptomatic for 24 hours, then you can start by going back to moderate activity and eventually going back to no contact drills and then back to practice and then eventually back to a game.
You heard the word from the doctor. This is Dr. Sandra Yen, neurosurgeon with Carolina Neurosurgery and Spine Associates. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
This is Kids, Chaos, and Coffee. And right now we want to talk about something that we think about, but sometimes maybe we move it to the back burner, and that is safety. As a parent, especially if you have more than one child, you are often juggling schedules. You're looking for convenience, things that make life easier, but also are very helpful for your children. Beyond school, you want to have them in programs, after school activities, sports, enrichment, the list goes on and on and on. But how often do you think about safety when you're signing your kids up for these activities? Joining us now is Kate Henderson, and Kate is an attorney. So Kate, we see, this is going to be a great class, a great sports league for my kid. Let me just sign this registration form so they can be ready to go. But you say we should read that very carefully and think about safety. In fact, you say there are two simple questions parents should ask themselves.
Yes, 100%. So the two questions that you should always ask are, one, tell me about an injury that occurred or an emergency situation, and tell me how it was handled. And then follow up to that by asking who debriefed after that situation and what has your program changed as a result. So any program that takes safety very seriously is going to be able to answer the questions to your satisfaction.
And often parents, because some things fill up so quickly and they may be the popular sports or the popular clubs, so you want to get your kid into it as soon as possible. So you just, hear from another parent and you're thinking, okay, this is great. But you say what questions parents should ask themselves before enrolling their children in these activities.
Absolutely. So certainly the marketing materials, right, or people talking about these programs are designed to highlight the fun of the program, right, and kind of entice you and not necessarily highlight any risks. So I always tell parents, make a list, make a handwritten list and ask about very specific things. Ask about basics in terms of child to adult ratios, which, there's rules for that depending on the state that you're in and depending on the type of program that you're in. You want to ask about medical certifications, right? Whether there's a nurse on staff or if, ideally everybody that's on staff is certified in medical training. And you also want to ask, most importantly, about emergency plans that the program may have, right? So we take a look at like the tragedy that we had at Camp Mystic, right? They didn't have emergency action plans in place that, maybe could have changed the outcome there. So it's very important to do your research and ask all the questions that you can before putting your kids in their hands.
And Kate, what would be the red flags?
Any red flags would include not having any emergency action plans, right? If you are not getting answers to your questions, if the program director or whoever it is isn't being straightforward, that is absolutely a huge red flag, because you want to make sure you're putting your kids in safe hands, right? They need to be able to answer your questions.
What about when we talk about our kids with allergies and medical medicines, medical emergencies, things of that sort? I recently learned that my son has an allergy we just discovered. How should we broach that with them? You say this, but do you make sure that they're aware that, okay, this kid has that allergy?
Right. So you want to make sure in a situation like that, how is the program identifying the children that may have food allergies or other specific types of allergies? Do they use wristbands or pins or some other kind of measure? And ask where the medications are kept. Ideally, you have, one or more adults that have access to these medications that are going to be safely locked up, and that they understand how to administer them in the case of an emergency involving a child.
And you say it's also important to ask about previous injuries or accidents that happened before. Why is it so important to do that?
It's important to always ask about prior injuries or accidents, because that is the best way for us as parents to get a feel for how the program is going to respond in the future, right? So again, the brochures and pamphlets and word of mouth that you're going to hear about these programs isn't going to be focused on any crises that they might have had in the past. So for you to point blank ask them, tell me about a time something bad happened. What did you do to address it in the moment? And what have you done to correct it as a result moving forward? That's going to give you all of the answers that you need.
And before we go, Kate, let's talk about, this is something that I'm always like, okay, what does this mean? Transportation and off-site activities. So your kid is enrolled in this camp or this program, but hey, at the end of this, there's a trip or there's something that's off-site. We have to be transported from place A to place B. At that point, I'm saying, okay, what does that mean? What are the safety procedures we should look for when that happens, when parents are asking questions?
Yeah, definitely. You want to be asking how the kids are going to be transported, right? If they're transported by bus, who's going to be driving? Do the drivers have the required certifications that are necessary in your state? If it's a bus, does it have seatbelts? How are seatbelts enforced? Once you get to the venue or other location, how many adults are going to be there for how many children? How do they keep track? How do they do head counts, right? What happens? What is the emergency plan in the instance that a child is separated from the group? You might even want to ask if that's happened before and, what the program did as a result. Again, any program that learns from its experience and is willing to share that with you is a green flag.
This is attorney Kate Henderson. We're talking about ways to keep your kids safe and questions to think about before you enroll them in those many activities. Kate, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
And we're back after this. Okay, so it is still summer, it is still hot, and that means you're probably, if you're fortunate, spending some time at the pool. Right now we are talking with Melissa Hull. She is an advocate, an author, and a speaker, and Melissa lost her son to drowning, so she has a message for all of us to be careful when it comes to pool safety. We do a lot of things, right? When the kids are hanging out, and it's easily to get distracted, but you say it's incredibly important that we remember safety first.
Absolutely. I think that the number one risk factor that we all face is distraction. And it is so easy today to become more distracted with phones. We walk around with these phones and they're wonderful tools, but a phone call, a text message that you choose to take when you are with your child near the water can be the one decision that can be the difference between tragedy or ending the day with a wonderful memory, and that's being distracted. A child can drown in under 30 seconds unattended in the water because the body will start to shut down immediately. So there's no scream. It's not like what we see in the movies where it's very cinematic and that there's a cry for help. Oftentimes it's quite the opposite. It's very silent. It happens very quickly. And so parents who get distracted by talking with other parents or looking at their phones can really be putting their children at an added danger this summer. So I want to make sure that we're taking time to talk about staying aware and not being distracted during pool time.
I remember when my daughter, she's 13 now, but when she couldn't swim and we would go to the pool and I would be like hyper vigilant, making sure that I was watching her all the time because she didn't know how to swim. She was still learning. But now that she knows how to swim, and I think maybe some parents are, also follow this where you're like, okay, she's good, she can swim, so maybe I don't have to worry as much. But you're saying you have to have a water watcher and there should be someone always looking.
Yes. So a child knowing how to swim does reduce risk, but it never eliminates risk. And that's why it's important to remember that even though you have a child who you believe is competent in the water, it still needs to be observed. So water watchers are designated, pre-assigned, essentially lifeguards or water watchers who have made the commitment to stay distraction free and to focus on the children that they are assigned to. Now, I always advocate to have multiple water watchers on site, especially when you're talking about backyard parties, barbecues, just anytime you have a multitude of people, because oftentimes people think that there's safety in numbers, and again, there's a greater risk of distraction with more people. So again, it's a wonderful opportunity to assign a water watcher so that you can enjoy your time and know that you have somebody who's qualified and competent there on site to keep your family safe.
And Melissa, you are an advocate for this space, particularly because of your personal experience. Tell us what led you to this journey.
So 26 years ago, I lost my oldest son, Drew, to an accidental drowning when he was 4.5 years old. So Drew drowned in an irrigation canal, which is not a pool, but it is, here in Arizona, we have a lot of agricultural land and there are open water systems throughout our community. In fact, there's over 200 miles of open water canals in our community, and that's why it's very important to understand water safety from a multitude of topics, whether it be pools or oceans, lakes or streams, but also fountains and canals. There's so many different risks that our children can face, and so that's why awareness and being informed helps keep everyone safe this summer.
And you've also written a book about moving through your grief as well. Tell us about the book.
So, Dear Drew, Creating a Life Bigger Than Grief was written for the person who's looking for that one question that we all, I think, want the answer to is how? How do we move forward after unimaginable loss? How does life still hold meaning and purpose? And that's what this book is really written. It's written for that person who's seeking those answers, but also wants to find ways to support themselves. So I have taken the 26-year journey that I have been on, and I have put it into one book to help that person who's on day one of their journey, to help support them as they continue to move forward and find a life worth living and that holds meaning and purpose.
Melissa, we certainly appreciate you being with us. And before we let you go, we want to also mention, as you said, there's one thing when you're watching your kids at the pool and when they're around bodies of water, regardless of the type. You also say when you're on vacation, because we're going on vacation to escape, to breathe, to relax, but that's also a time to remember to watch your kids.
Absolutely. I wish that risk took a vacation, but unfortunately, risk follows us wherever we go. So, vigilance and preparedness is, I think, the best combination to approach your vacation time, because everyone wants a good time. Everybody wants to go and relax and come back from a vacation feeling restored and renewed. And the best way to do that is to stay safe and to stay aware and be prepared, especially around water this summer.
Advocate, author, and speaker Melissa Holm. Melissa, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me today.